we've got a great, I think what we've got is a great focus. And I think today is a good sign of, this is exactly why this is so important, because contractors think about this, and they think about this like the Staples button. I should push the Staples button and people should come out. And those people should have the same thoughts and values that I do about my organization, and should want to put the same amount of dedication into my organization. And then the breakdown of the reality to the desire comes. And this is where so much of the difficulty comes in recruiting in the contracting and construction business. So what better way to kind of start this off than, let's dive in and talk about these 6 myths. Let's talk about kind of why we're here to talk about them. And, we can begin from there.
We had Jad. I can't see.
Yeah,
I can't.
We've got a guest. So welcome to the webinar. We're going to dive right in and get talking about what are the 6 hiring myths that hold contractors back from success. First off, let's introduce Paul, the founder of CSS. Paul, tell us about yourself.
Well, hi, I'm an old guy. I've been doing this for 40 years, I think, something like that. And in that time, I've worked with, I don't know, some number like 2,000 contractors, a lot, and I've learned a lot. And my wife tells me, she gets tired of hearing the same thing over and over and over again as I was coaching stuff. And about, I guess, 4 years ago, the biggest problem we had with our clients was we could grow the marketing side of the business, but they couldn't find the people. So my first idea was, well, I'm going to give them a great software. We found some really good applicant tracking software. We found some really good assessment software. We gave it to them and they screwed up. Didn't have time to do it, like no time for time management, right? So then I hired Justin, put him in my garage, literally, and said, why don't you offer this? We offer this service to some of my clients on, monthly basis and see how it goes. And that was, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago. And now we have like 300 clients and 21 people on the team. Last year we went through 75,000 resumes to hire, I think, 400 people. We average about 5, maybe 10, 15 hires a week. And we go through 1,500 resumes a week, something like that. So it's grown a lot. And so we've learned a lot in that process. And so we're going to share that with you here. And introducing Justin, my first guy. Justin, you're on.
Thank you. Well, I'm proud to be the Director of Affiliate and Client Relations with Contractor Staffing Source. Human resources is a big passion of mine. I went through the Cornell HR program at their International Labor and Human Relations School. And I've also learned a lot at Contractor Staffing Source about Wimbush assessments, which talk about logic and personality, and Colby assessments, which talk about team collaboration. So, with Paul's business acumen and with what I've learned about HR, we've put together a really powerful package that helps people hire in a more scientific and more enjoyable sort of way. So let's dive in. And way back in the garage days, as Paul puts it, we began with this statement. What is the definition of a worst employee? The definition of a worst employee is someone who is not bad enough to fire, but not good enough to keep. Paul, this is an adage that you've shared with your clients so many times. Any thoughts to share on this? Well,
statement? I think it's, every contractor I've worked with, and there's been literally 1,000 plus in the years, has that guy or a woman. And we have the conversation over again. 1 week, oh my God, he's amazing. Next week, I got to get rid of him. No, he's amazing. And so not only is it hard emotionally on the owners, it's also difficult for the rest of the employees because they have to deal with this person. And I think one of the attributes that one of our clients say best about our services is we prevented them from hiring that person who could have been one who's not, bad enough to fire, good enough to keep. Because those people tend to look good on paper and they tend to interview well. And then once they because you can't really do a deep dive interview because you don't have, a lot of contractors don't have the resources to do that or the assessments and that kind of thing. And then once the person comes on board, a month later, 2 months later, you go, oh, man, it doesn't quite work out, but he's not really, or she's not bad enough to fire, that horrible. But on the other hand, they really don't do their job and they just become like this purgatory for a long time. And that's one of the things we definitely want to avoid.
So when we talk about that, we talk about, finding this person in your company and then the psychology that comes around having this person in your company and the myths that might be created through it. So that's, the centerpiece of our presentation today is how to prevent finding these worst employees by first off looking at these myths and perhaps dispelling them. So let's start what are the 6 myths that hold people back? The first is that we should only recruit when we need somebody. The second is that employees are actually expensive. The third is we can do all the recruiting ourselves. The fourth myth is to recruit only within the talent in the construction industry. The fifth, hire fast and fire slow. And the sixth, recruiting is a project that ends. So we're going to dive in meaningfully on each of these 6 myths. Let's start first with myth number 1, only recruit when you need someone. So if we think about only recruiting when we need someone, a great analogy or image to come to one's mind is your favorite professional sports team. And think about how deep the pool in that team is and when they stop recruiting. They don't stop recruiting because professional sports teams realize they need to have backup players in all of their positions. And they also need to build a bench so they can identify and maintain excellence within their organization. For, as contractors, think about the pool of different subcontractors you have in each trade. You wouldn't have one electrician or only one plumber on your list. You'd have a great variety of them. So this is something Paul has dealt with clients, day in and day out, is that idea of building a bench or, those concepts. Paul, what thoughts do you have in that?
Well, I think also when you need someone, the problem is a time constraint because, all of a sudden your project manager leaves or goes someplace else and throws a wrench in the works and you're desperate. And then desperation never leads to good hiring practices because you take the first guy that comes along that sort of does the job. And so if you only hire when you need some, which happens a lot, they go, oh my God, this happened. And unfortunately, we get a lot of those calls, right? People call us and say, I need a project manager yesterday. My guy just left. I don't know what I'm going to do. The project is at stall. The client's all upset with us. I had to go out there the last 3 days and hold it together. Can you get me somebody right away? And Justin, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think the most important thing to do is to say the primary function of you as a business owner is to actually build a team. We should think about the whole wealth of your team. And this is why we need to build you a recruiting plan. So when someone comes to me with urgency, I'll say, well, okay, we're going to look to fill this hole, but how do we look at the whole team? What resources do you already have that might help you with that? What other resources in your team can we use? We shouldn't just be thinking about recruiting when somebody leaves. Well, as a recruiter, we're amenable to helping make placements. The other part of it is thinking about team building and empowering you to know diagnostically who has the right skills and talent. You'd never build a house without blueprints. So without knowing the strengths and weaknesses cognitively, behaviorally, and occupationally about your staff, how can we say that we're actually, allocating talent and resources appropriately? So the best practices we talk about in HR are always be recruiting. Don't hire out of desperation. Don't say, oh, geez, my back's against the wall. I've got to end up with this bad fit. A lot of times people will say, well, the other guy offered me $100,000 and I'm going to go there. Well, then go there. I mean, you should find somebody that wants to work with you and follows your vision. Getting blindsided when someone leaves the company or says, hey, raised by blackmail is only going to lead to more negativity and loss of trust. So, make sure that you're going to hire and grow. If someone says, hey, I need a bonus, say, well, sure, you're going to need to do these 5 more complicated things to earn that bonus and keep the energy dynamics in your company moving healthy. And if that person doesn't fit anymore, say, you know what? We've met our life cycle. I've got somebody else on my bench who can work. Using assessments, and we're very partial towards the Wimbush assessments, really make sure that a good fit occurs. So I always say, when in distress, you should assess. If we don't know what to do, using an assessment to give you more data, make sure that you are picking the right person. And always recruiting gives you the accessibility to know the right person in the right time at any time.
And many times I tell clients, this is an easy industry if you've got great clients, which has to do with awesome marketing all the time, and you've got great employees to do the work. But if you have marginal employees, even one bad employee, plus clients that are not fun, they're sort of pain in the butt, then it becomes a real problem. The 80-20 rule takes over. 20% of your clients and 20% of your employees cause 80% of your problems. It becomes a very difficult and stressful industry to be in. And over the years, I've done this, as I said, hundreds and maybe 100,000 hours, that it's all about, the discussions are all about the employee that's not working out, or the client who's not paying their bill. And, if you look at, I think the contractor's most important skill is to build a team. I use the Elon Musk example. I mean, he's a really smart guy, but there's a lot of smart guys in MIT that are professors. He's been able to build great teams. And I know that's not something that a contractor says, well, my success of my company depends on the ability to build a great team. But I believe that has more to do with their success than anything else. And yet that's not something they spend a lot of time learning.
True. And I think it leads to the next myth, saying that employees are expensive. The myth really is, the more employees I have, the more overhead I'm going to have. Therefore, the more we need to work. And therefore, the more I need to work. But the reality is, the more employees you have, the less you, the owner, should have to work, and the more profit you can make. We often talk about, and Paul more so than myself, talked about buying back your time as a business owner. So, our clients that work the least make the most money, and they actually have the most employees. And it's really fun to watch these companies grow and watch your team members thrive around you. And in that same movement, empower your company. We really get into EOS, and we talk about the EOS concepts of, employees are worthy investment. Paul has taken the EOS concepts and brought them into his coaching and into contractor staffing source as well. And the concept of delegate and elevate is something that we do daily. Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Well, it's important because I can't tell you how many, it's easy to get a contractor to buy a backhoe, or computers a little harder, but it's something you can see and feel. But they look at their employees, instead of seeing them as the best investment, they look at them as an expense. And I just had a conversation the other day, and he goes, well, I can't afford that person. I go, well, but you can't afford not to have that person, because you have to do this all yourself. In that case, he couldn't do his marketing because he was too busy project managing. And you buying your time back, because your time is much more valuable. And a lot of people, they have no problem investing in stuff. It could be, new office, it could be a computer, it could be software, whatever. But the best investment you ever make is in people, because you can't make any money without employees, right? They're by definition how you create wealth and how you create revenue. So when you think about the ROI in an employee, the average person may spend whatever, $8,000 a month, whatever it is, and that comes back to you many-fold. And also, they look at this as a long-term commitment, and you have to look at it month to month. You bring on somebody on board, and maybe $8,000 a month. You don't look at it's $100,000 a year. Say, well, let's see how he does or she does. If they do a great job, and they're they're helping themselves and helping you and contributing to the company, they're an awesome investment. If they're not, they can go. But unlike fixed assets, employees are variable expense, and they can come and they go as you need them. Whereas if you buy a truck or a computer or a router or whatever, you're stuck with it. I mean, the payments keep going on. So a lot of employers just look at employees as an expense, and yet it's the best investments you could ever make.
Absolutely. And I think the concepts here are really about, when you hire employees, each employee brings something additively to the organization. The connections that they have and the skill sets that they bring allow you to bring in a new sense of clientele, a new book of business, help you with connections and referrals that they might be able to bring. Perhaps if you hire in a new person in a production team, to find a better list of subcontractors, or to hire an office manager that comes with operations procedures that perhaps makes your company more efficient, or that HR person that just is, charismatic and great, and improves morale and friendliness within the organization. All of these are things that you as a leader have on your shoulders daily. And by hiring the right people, you can leverage that, buy back your time. At Contractor Staffing Source, working with our clients, one of the things that we work on most heavily is getting clients to buy back their time, disperse the skills out to a broader team of greater capacity. And I think Paul's done an expert job of that internally within the organization, and now in coaching to the other clients. Day to day, Paul, you see this. Can you speak to the direct effect this
Well,
process
and one of
has?
the things, I had a conversation the other day, we're doing recruiting for somebody, and he goes, well, I can't really afford a project manager at this moment. And I said, well, let's say his name's John. If I could bring you a project manager that knew all the right architects, could bring you a ton of work, knew all the right subcontractors, which would have it in all the, basically came equipped with business and the people to do it, would you hire him? He said, of course. And I said, you're not going to find that person if you look for him. And to find that person may take us 2 or 3 months. But once you find that person, they'll contribute to your business greatly. Otherwise, if you're just looking for a project manager that doesn't have any resources to share with you, it's not going to be such a good investment. But again, there's a correlation between how hard and long it takes to find somebody and the value of that investment. That project manager who has a connection with architects, who has a connection with subcontractors, who brings a lot of resources with him, is not going to be there tomorrow. And fortunately, you never know when he's looking for a job. I mean, he could have got up, he'd be worked for a competition, he's working on for 10 years, has all these resources. For some reason, his boss upset him last week for whatever reason. He decides, I'm done, I'm going to find a new job. Well, if you're not out there, he's not going to know you're looking, and he'll go to work for your competition. So I've always managed, if I describe the right person, there's always room in the company for that person.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's dive into the next myth here, that we can do this ourselves. Every successful contractor knows that you have the best subs, and they know that you're going to find the best outsourced labor to do those tasks. Successful contractors do often have, marketing people, web designers, bookkeepers, maybe cleaners, a list of individuals they outsource tasks to. So when we consider that, why wouldn't you take the same approach to recruiting? Just like any of the other trades that you work with, to find someone who's specialized in that trade that you can contract them out to, so that you can leverage your time on the things you're best at. We talk about the concepts. Recruiting is really a complex process, and you do have to have a skill set that most contractors don't have to understand the personalities and the technical navigations and all the nuances legally and otherwise, to manage an HR campaign. It is a full-time job to go and manage the variety of sources required in this tough market, to find people and to keep a healthy pipeline in an HR, form going. It is a daily activity. And if you don't have someone on your staff or on your behalf working daily on it, it will have a deleterious effect on your HR campaign. And oftentimes I hear with clients, oh, my office manager will do that. We can just go on Indeed and try that. In addition to all of the other things this individual has to do, it really is very complicated to manage the time and the energy required to do that exceptionally. So in this market, it's the quick and the dead. And if we wait a couple of days, it's too late.
It's sort of like people that have no problem buying a new truck. They see the investment there, right? I get net because it's a physical truck. But when you look at, the most valuable asset you have is your team, right? But somehow investing in building a big team is not standard in the construction industry. It's, well, I can do that for free. Like you're probably not doing plumbing or an electrical because you're not really good at it. Well, trust me, most contractors are not good at recruiting. The way I see most contractors do this is they put an ad in Indeed, then they wait a week, maybe, call the person back, and they have they read some book somewhere about how to recruit people if we're lucky, and they usually don't have any assessment process, and they do an interview and say, well, it looks pretty good, let's give it a shot, right? Then it becomes the world's worst employee. And that's very difficult. When you hire that person, it's really hard to get rid of them. And yet they won't invest the energy, time, or whatever, because we get back to people in hours, not days. Mm-hmm. And that we have people all over the world. So, I remember we did a thing finding carpenters, and for one of our clients, we literally had to get back to these guys within 3 to 5 minutes, to 10, 20 minutes, because they'd be gone. Mm-hmm. And yet most contractors, they put an ad in, they wait, a week, call people back. All the good people are gone. The people left on the list you don't even hire anyway. But they're not really good at the process. But unfortunately, the cost of that is hard to see. It's having a mediocre team or a marginal team versus an awesome team. It's not like you can look at the new truck versus the old truck. So the cost of doing that is really hard to see. But trust me, the quality of your team will determine the quality of your life as a contractor.
Absolutely. Again, I often see with the clients that we work with, they're looking for that, like, I push the Staples button and good people come out, where in reality, there are 10 steps that any successful recruiting program is going to have to use. You're going to have to write the right job ads. The job ads are going to have to fit the variety of rules for all of the different places that you're posting them, and thereby attract the right candidates. You're going to have to go out and find all the right places to put it and respond to those people, like Paul said, in many cases in minutes. Then you're going to want to screen the people to find out who are the right fits and who are the wrong fits. From there, we're going to want to find out about their skills and their personality in whichever best way we can. We're going to want to begin an interview and a background check process. We're going to have to check references. We're going to look at what the market is bearing for job offers within your industry and position. Have to come up with competitive job offers that fit all the legalese of your region. And then on top of that, we now need to build an onboarding process that is compliant with best practices in HR and again, with your market. So that's a lot of stuff to do. And for the office manager to just say, yeah, I got it. Oftentimes we find that's where, like Paul said, if we miss one of these steps, the wrong hire does slip through and the cost to the company can just be so significant. So again, outsourcing your recruiting, just like you'd outsource anything else, really does make a lot of sense and is the best practice in the HR community.
And there's a couple models for outsourcing. We have one model where people pay, a relatively low monthly fee. And I've done that because it's hard to get contractors to pay a percentage of salary. I know, I think we did a company last year, probably an $8 million ad, we charged 20% of the first year's salary and they have maybe a negative feeling about recruiters because I paid, 20% of 100,000, maybe 20,000 for that guy, it didn't work out. So there is, so typical recruiters are, still selling stolen goods for the much as they can get, right? So it's a different model than we have. But it's important that you put those skills in because you're only as good as your people, and your people are only as good as your process.
Exactly. And this leads us into the next myth. Many people fall into this one. You must recruit from the construction industry. And I think, this is one that I've heard time and time again. I think Paul really, nailed perfectly. The pandemic was a lesson that, skills transfer from industry to industry. Construction boomed, but the hospitality and entertainment industry, travel industries, they all crashed. And we saw that. We saw people quitting and moving to other locations, other positions, and other industries. What we saw is a lot of people with transferable skills were moving out of the cities into other communities. And in so doing, we saw a real big talent shift. We saw that talent shift at Contractor Staffing Service as an opportunity. And in that opportunity, we've been able to help people strike gold by tapping into other industries. Some of the things that we found, and I think the one I'd love to hear Paul share his story with, is our wedding planner. We've had some great success with selection coordinators and pre-construction people.
Right.
Who used to be wedding planners.
When you think about it, what does a wedding planner have to do? They have to get a bunch of sort of flaky people together. There's the band, there's the flower person, there's the caterer. These people are not really totally reliable. They're just who they are, right? Then they have to get them all to the venue at the right time. Everybody has to show up at the right time. They've got to put on this production, which is the wedding, for people that are already stressed out, which is the groom and the bride and the bride's mom. So you got a bunch of stressed out people dealing with a bunch of flaky people to put an organization together to have an event come off well and have everybody be happy and get paid. Sounds like the remodeling industry to me. And so these people choose to do this because they love to do it. It's not they're forced to. They're choosing wedding planners because they like that whole process. So we've placed some wedding planners as selection coordinators, and they've just killed it. And also, traditionally, the hospitality industry pays significantly less than the construction industry. So we get some of the top talent that were wedding planners to become selections coordinators or office managers. We had somebody manage 5 hotels and office to manage. It works really well. But a lot of times people go, well, if they don't have construction experience, they don't understand. Who they are, you can't fix. What they know, you can fix, right? So if they're a person who likes to organize stuff, has a sense of design, enjoys creating beautiful things, and that's who they are, they can learn to transfer that skill from, doing a wedding to doing a remodel. It's not that far of a stretch.
Exactly. That's when we talk about hire for ability and train for expertise, what Paul just said hits the nail home. Who they are is way more important than what they know. Attitude and ability, that can-do attitude that we found in many of those wedding planners was what allowed them to strive and attain success in the construction industry. They can learn the skills. They can learn Builder Trend or Co-Construct or your spreadsheets and become, a leader. And they can take the training that you've built and build an ongoing training program. They can maybe even spitfire some of your HR and training programs internally. We talk about, in the next concept here is hire fast, fire slow. And we talk about the book Who, which I think seems myths 4 and 5 together quite nicely. But what is the danger of hiring too fast? People, are desperate. They need somebody. They make an impulse and say, well, this guy has all of the custom home building skills I'm looking for. We don't check into personality, perhaps a bad fit happens. Whereas, we have to fix the bad fits. It costs us time. We have to deal with this personality difficulty. Again, we could have been getting stuff done. So when we look at the concept, the fancy pants term is Markov analysis, but a hiring mistake costs something about 5 times the employee's salary and hard costs. So productivity lost on a $100,000 a year employee can be up to $1.5 million in costs. Just think about that, and what that does to your company. So what are the most important decisions you're going to have to make? I mean, it really is, who are you going to work with? But even more so, who are you going to hire? They're going to guide the direction of your company. The ship, they're going to move the rudder of your ship. So, we need to make sure we don't hire fast and hire someone desperate. And I'm sure we've seen more than one situation, Paul, with our clients. People have come in desperate and wanted to hire fast. So let's talk about that. The dangers of firing slow. The dangers of firing slow is that having this bad actor in our organization can really be horrible for morale. As other team players, see this person, disparage the company or create negativity within the organization. I love this quote: nothing will kill a great employee faster than watching you tolerate a bad one. If your team members aren't thinking about how to save time and money or help you optimize the organization, a lot of people will deal with the economic pain because they don't want to deal with the emotional pain of letting them go. So,
right. And there's a very fine line between codependence and being a nice guy. And I can't tell you, my clients over time or people I work with have said, well, I need the guy the second, the third, the fourth, fifth chance, and they haven't showed up for work, or they lied, or they did whatever they did, right? Done. Mm-hmm. And thing is, they go, well, I don't want to be a bad person. I want to be a nice guy. And to me, tolerating behavior that's destructive to them and the company, I call codependence. And that isn't good for any parties involved.
Mm-hmm. We talk about, rather than this hire fast, fire slow, we say don't hire slow. Instead, engage quickly, but take the time to vet your candidates. Which is why in the initial process, when we get back to new applicants, we respond within hours. And in many cases, particularly in labor positions, we have to respond within 20 minutes and say, hey, this is going to be a dedicated process that will take some time and some investigation on both sides. If you're willing to take that process, we'd really love to have you, perhaps become part of the team. And then we take time. In our process, it takes about a week to do our due diligence. And that's how we're able to create that 92% retention rate that we're so unbelievably proud of here at Contractor Staff. So, don't hire slow. Instead, engage quickly and vet slowly. In addition to that, fire fast. Don't tolerate a bad employee. Like we talked at the beginning, the worst employee is someone who's not bad enough to fire, but not good enough to keep. Paul, why don't you talk about this next part here about employees are like a marriage?
Well, it's easy to get, I'm sure a lot of people that watch this webinar have learned that it's easy to get married and hard to get divorced. And it's, divorces can be very expensive. Yes. And it's just hard. And so it's better to take the time to choose the right employee, because if they're the employees that we talked about, who's not good enough to keep, bad enough to fire, they stay on for a long time. They bring the whole organization down. And it's hard to look at the actual cost of that, but I will tell you it's expensive emotionally and financially.
The cultural misfit is much worse than a skills misfit. It instantly begins to manipulate and degrade the culture of your company, which is why we feel like our behavioral assessment really helps you determine the right fit. Again, in leadership, we often talk about the no rules rules. Reed Hastings, the founder of Netflix, has the no rules rule and says a company is a team, not a family. Teams demand excellence. Every position should be filled by the best person at any given time. We train and we play to win. continuous feedback from coaching on how we can up our games. This collaborative environment allows everybody to kind of strive and grow, but it also connects people in an appropriate forward direction. Effort is not enough. Again, just trying your best, shouldn't be rewarded, is what the no rules hire, Reed Hastings methodology says. We talk about in that the keeper test is if an employee were to quit tomorrow, could you try to change their mind? Or would you accept the resignation with some relief? Or would you fire them and look for another rock star? We look at within our performance assessment system and other tools, who is the top and bottom 10% of any organization, and identify how do we nurture the top 10% and how do we appropriately eject the bottom 10%.
Right.
You work with a lot of our clients. What are your thoughts, Paul?
Well, my thought, there's a lot of times I ask, people working with this, that is, if you were to start your company over again, and for whatever reason, the construction company, who would you rehire and who would you not rehire? And anybody I think that you shouldn't rehire, you should consider letting go, because they're not there because you wanted to be there. They're there because they're just there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think these are all really strong reasons why finding a trusted advisor who has HR best practice knowledge and has your occupational and the behavioral needs of your organization best in mind, is really an important asset to any construction organization. And it ties into the last myth that we've often seen, is that like a project, recruiting comes to the end. Construction companies undoubtedly treat, everything kind of like a project that has a beginning, middle, and end. But when you look at other parts of your business, whether it be, marketing, sales, recruiting, project mentality doesn't work, as a life cycle really is required. And we found that's one of the hardest things I'm sure Paul and the other coaches that we've had to work with have identified, is that recruiting is a continuous project. It is not a finite start end type of thing. And you should always be marketing and recruiting. It's about relationship building. So we say, just like, marketing, you should always be recruiting. It's an ongoing relationship-based thing. Recruiting is ongoing relationships with candidate prospects. We talk about use the same strategies that you would use for marketing in your recruiting. We post customer reviews on the website to attract new clients. Using employee reviews about what's awesome about your company helps you draw new candidates in. Having positive stuff out in that grapevine, if you will, about what's going on in your company, again, gives you that ability to attract new talent, new ideas. We've seen that, meaningfully, where we've attracted new different people that came in with ideas about computer science or artificial intelligence or sales and marketing, and brought a whole new abundance to the organization. And I think this is one of the things that, I really respect in Paul and in what we provide as an organization, is this abundance mindset to open possibilities. If you're coming from a place for abundance, there's always room for new people in the organization, a new superstar or top performer. You want a big team of superstars. But if you're coming from lack and fear, your culture won't want to hire top performers because you'll want to feel like, you're threatened by that. Paul, you deal with this regularly.
Well, I mean, the one thing I've found, you can have two companies that are literally 2 blocks away, right? And they're both remodeling companies. And you talk to the owner, and one owner says, there's no good people in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a wasteland for good project managers. I've tried, can't find a good person in Philadelphia. Philadelphia just sucks. Never going to find anybody good. The guy a block down the street says, I love Philadelphia. The guy's amazing people. I can't believe how great my project managers are. I mean, they just killed it. I attract all these awesome people. I love Philadelphia. It's the best marketplace I've ever been for attracting project managers. And they're like a block apart. So what's the difference in the two companies? It's certainly not Philadelphia.
Right. Yeah, positive mental output, creates so much abundance. And in talking to all of our different recruitment specialists and recruitment staff as well, we've found that the abundance mindset between clients in the HR campaign with the applicants makes a humongous difference as well, particularly during the interview process. So, we highly recommend that you interview these candidates even when you're not hiring. Interview 1 to 2 candidates a month so that you can get a barometer, what's out in the market? Do you have the best talent in your team? Are there new ideas out there? Are there new concepts that you and your team should be looking at? And be honest and upfront with a candidate if you're not really interested, and say, I'm not looking for someone, but I am always looking for top performers. If you think you can bring something to the table new and unique, let's keep in touch. Or say, hey, you know what? I'm looking for, I'm looking for stuff in your area. I'd love to work with people in your area. If you know anybody, let me know. I mean, Paul, you do this regularly, and I'm sure have more insights there on how owners can leverage their ability to just keep
it's something you're always on the lookout for: good clients and good people, right? So it means when you're in a restaurant, you're visiting Home Depot, you can put little posters up. You can ask your client, your current clients, or for other clients, your current clients are possibly for employees, and same thing as employees referring clients, employees for the employees. You've got a network of people. The average person, I think, knows like 100, 200 people. But you've got to be out there with it. You've got to be constantly looking for the right person, and you have to recognize them when they show up. And that there's two skills there. One is always looking, and one is recognizing when they show up and being willing to adapt to that. Because a lot of people will, well, I can't afford that guy, or that that person's, and we talked about that earlier. If it's the right person, you can always afford to hire them, because they're going to contribute way more than they're going to cost you. But again, a lot of contractors don't, they didn't grow up in HR. They're, could be they're just not inherently businessman. They didn't say, I got my, degree from Stanford or whatever in business management, I'm going to be a contractor. That isn't what makes up this industry. This is a very fractionalized industry. It's made up of a bunch of cowboys, for lack of a better term. They became contractors because they lost their job, or they got mad at their boss, and they decided to transfer their building skills from building for somebody else to building for themselves. But a lot of them, when I meet some kids, say, well, Paul, if you're going to give me one piece of advice, just one, what would you suggest? I say, always work harder on yourself than you do on your job. And that is something that, a lot of people don't quite grasp. So when a contractor, the ability for a contractor to build a winning team all depends on their building team skills. There's books on it. We can help them do it. There's lots of ways you can learn to build a winning team. You can work with companies like ourselves, but your success will depend on your team. And yet most contractors I worked over the years do not see that as a huge priority. They see getting the new truck, or getting, if we're lucky, getting the software or some other kind of thing, but they don't understand that their biggest asset is their employees, and their biggest effort needs to be in building their team, not in buying other stuff that may not be quite as productive.
Absolutely. And I think that, at this point now we can start talking about, rather than what are the 6 hiring myths, what are the 6 hiring realities? The 6 hiring realities are that you should always be recruiting like a good sports club. You should identify that employees are a worthy investment and help you buy back your time. The other hiring realities are we can outsource our recruiting to specialists, just like we do to trade vendors, to maximize our output and efficacy. Find exceptional talent outside of the construction industry by looking at abilities that maybe can be used within the industry more affordably. Hire slow and fire fast, but make sure you have a designated diagnostic process to find the right person. And lastly, unlike a project, recruiting is an ongoing process. By changing those myths into these realities, not only will it be more likely that you'll be able to be abundant and find the talent and leverage your company in the directions you're able to go, but you will undoubtedly find better people in your market and have better connectivity with those individuals. Any thoughts on the 6 hiring realities, Paul?
Well, I think they're easy to say and hard to do.
Yes.
Because, it's sort of like, how do you get in shape? You eat right and you exercise. We're done, right? And America keeps getting fatter and dying younger because somehow they haven't got it, right? So I'd say the biggest problem with all these is actually get people to do them. That's the issue. And in fact, Eric Cofield is here with APB, and he's a well-known business coach. You have any comments on this, Eric? Because you get the reality of finding how this actually, you got the challenge of implementing this stuff, right?
Yeah, hey, I've just been sitting here on mute, so it took me a second to unmute. I think this is really good information because a lot of builders do have these myths there wherever they came from in their mind. Um, a lot of builders haven't gone to a business school. They don't have general business management degrees. And so they've come up through the trades and they've learned in whatever way they've learned. So going through these myths and the realities, because for every myth, there is a reality, I think that helps them a lot. And what you guys are talking about really resonates well with me because for the dozens of builders that I deal with in private coaching, they all have these needs. And so I think it's great information. So, bravo to you guys for all that. Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
I see that we've got a couple guests here. So if there's any questions, please, the floor is yours. Any questions that we could help to even make your existing HR processes work better and smoother. Don't want to put you on the spot, but I see a Derek in the room. If there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at Contractor Staffing Source. In addition to that, we are willing to share our executive assessment. The executive assessment will give you a really great understanding of how do we build the diagnostics to help you find a good fit. If you've got a prospective hire that maybe you're looking at, or if you'd like to do it yourself, the most powerful one is to do it yourself. I know when Paul asked me to do the assessment myself, and then him and the founder came and did it, I was looking for cameras and microphones in the room. It was so accurate. So I would be honored to give that opportunity to any member of the audience. Yeah, if there's any other questions, please, the floor is yours.
So I would say moving along, what we need to do is we're here as a resource, and obviously APB is a resource. So if we can do anything to help you hire better, we're willing to do that, because when you think about it, you're only as good as your team. And any effort you want to make improving your team, that's what we're here to help you do. I think that's a major issue for most contractors. And again, work harder on your company than you do on other things. And unfortunately, a lot of contractors don't either. So they don't know what they don't know, for lack of a better term. They don't understand that, well, how hard I put an ad Indeed and find some guy that comes along and I'm done. But that's why the construction industry has a really not great reputation for high turnover, because the people doing the hiring, it's a fractionalized industry. You're not dealing with, IBM here or some big company that has well-established practices. They're just winging it. And unfortunately, the most expensive school in the world is the school of hard knocks, right? Learning from experience. And they don't realize a bad employee can cost them $50,000, and that's expensive. So I think it's important to adopt these, practices and not hold these myths, because after doing this for years and years, I consider this probably the biggest problem in the construction industry, is that the owners of companies don't have experience in building great teams. Because if they had great teams, their life would be a lot easier.
We agreed, yeah. So I just reached out to Derek and sent out my email address. Derek, we can connect when the timing is right, and I'd be glad to help you with your HR journey. Eric, thank you for listening to our presentation. And Jennifer, you can edit the ends off the start and the ends here, and we'll have a great video to share for our future presentation.
Right. Thank you, and thanks for showing up, Eric. I appreciate it.